am delighted to introduce you to Todd Felderstein. He is one of my new friends and one of my new favorite people on the planet. Every time we get on the phone, he makes me laugh a lot.
Oh,
And anyone that can laugh in these times and find ways to bring joy to these strange times is someone who I really like to hang out with. And he's doing just some really delightful, amazing things. And I'm not going to go through his bio because you all have his bio, which is very extensively impressive. But I am going to tell you a couple of things about him that I do want you to know, which is that he's just phenomenally prolific. We are really getting an opportunity to be with someone who understands theater, who understands film, who understands story, working in different mediums. So, like, really make the most of our time with him today because we have this multidimensional, storied mind with us. He's a prolific writer himself. He just finished a feature film, and he's also the producer of the Smartphone Theater, which you should totally check this out. This was like, talk about someone who made the most of COVID. Holy cow, this was just amazing. And something I just learned today that he has something in common with Norman Lear, who's 99 years old and hasn't stopped going. They both have ponytails. You can't see it. There we go. And this is designed to be a highly interactive class. You should have lots of things going on. You're more than welcome to raise your hand at any time. And I'm going to hand over the baton to Todd.
well, thank you, Leah. Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and we're just really here talking about story and the benefits of storytelling. As Leah mentioned, I don't sit still well, and so this is a plus and a minus. You know, some people they do one thing and they do it really well, and I'm one of those people who goes, "Oh, let's do, oh, that's great," and I wind up doing a lot of things, but I've done that for such a long time that it is now all sort of coming together. In the beginning, when you're professionally going off, it's all been in the same arena for the most part. But even so, when you're professionally going off in lots of directions, people don't like that, especially when I started. It's very hard from a professional standpoint to market yourself when they say, "Oh, you do theater. Oh, you do film. Oh, you do this. Oh, you do that." People don't like that. They want one thing. But now luckily life is changing and there's lots of hyphenates and I've been doing it for a really long time, so it's great. But as Leah said, I am very active in the theater world. I'm very active in the film world. I've written for TV also. I wrote animation actually, and that just sort of happened, and done nonfiction. And all of these, the similarity between everything is that all are story based and all basically have the same structure when you're talking about story. I mean, you know, there's a saying, and I forgot who actually said it, but that story has a beginning, middle, and an end. It just doesn't necessarily have to go in that direction. And you know, you can build it any way you want as long as you're getting your point across. Um, Beginning, middle, and ends are great, and they're great for the reason that it's easy to follow. So you follow a beginning, there's an establishing whatever, and then we go into the meat of the story. The meat of the story is the conflict, it's the journey, and then we have a resolution at the end. Now there could be all sorts of messes that take you from the beginning to the middle to the end. In fact, I watched something last night. I think it was on HBO, and it's based on a true story, and it's about a husband and wife in England, and they were living in Paris. Leah, maybe you know this story. They were living in Paris, an older couple, and then they ran out of money, and they confessed to somebody, to their whomever, that they ran out of money. They needed to borrow money, and they had to leave in a hurry because they had buried their in-laws. So basically, they had killed their in-laws and they buried them 15 years ago, and they buried them in the backyard. And then they went to Europe, and they were all very, you know, matter of fact, very casual. It's a true story. And I bring this up because the the structure is very interesting, and the filmmaking is very interesting. So if you have the opportunity to see it, they actually cut it to make it look like it's a home movie, and then all of a sudden they bring it into real time, and then jumps back and forth between black and white and color. And so they have a palette that is very specific to the series. And you'll see that if you watch it, that later on, that palette actually plays into the storytelling. So when you're talking about films, especially films and TV, and it's also true with theater, but films and TV, because it's such an in-your-face medium, and there's so many people creating it, is that the story isn't only necessarily your script. There is so much, your visual medium, your palette, your wardrobe, all of the aspects actually go into telling the story. It isn't just what you say. All right, great. So the way I'm going to structure this in the beginning, and then we may deviate, is both from a writer perspective, and this is more from a playwright screenwriter perspective, not a novelist, and a director perspective. And I'm going to try to lean heavy a little bit on the director. So when you work in TV or in film, there's something called breaking the story. Is anybody familiar with that term, breaking the story? You could just wave. Okay. So sort of, kind of. So breaking the story is that everybody here writes to a certain degree. Yes? Okay. So when you sit down and you have this great idea, you have your pen, you have your paper, which everybody has the pen and the paper. Mine never, I have so many notebooks lying around here. You start writing and you start writing and you write and you write and you write. And then there comes to a period when you go, what am I writing? I mean, everybody has experienced this. And they write even more and they write even more. Now, if you write TV, there's something called a writer's room. And most shows have a writer's room. And writer's rooms will go anywhere between 4 and 12 people, traditionally. There's exceptions. There's some shows where you have a writer's room, but your showrunner, and that is the person who runs the show, they may say to the writers, okay, you have episode 1, you have episode 2, you have episode 3, go away. And just go away, write your episode, come back, and then we'll play with it. Typically, it's people sitting in a room and they talk about the story. They talk about their characters. And what are they talking about? Well, the main thing is they want to find out, especially if it's a new series, they want to find out what it's about. So you may say, oh, there's a story about, let's see here. I'm just going to look at the world. We have Kenji and Lori. So the story could be about Kenji and Lori. Where's Kenji and Lori? Okay, I see Kenji. There's Lori. Okay, great. Story about Kenji and Lori, and they meet in a Starbucks, and both are single, and they're like, okay, well, this is going to be a relationship show. Well, so they hash things out and they hash things out. Well, they don't really know what the story is about until, it sounds funny, they know what the story is about. And when they make that discovery, that's called breaking the story. And your showrunner may know, or all your writers may know. They may learn this as a group. Your showrunner may get a job and say, you know what, we want to do a story about, guy who's taking a screenwriting class. Somebody who's taking a screenwriting class, and he goes to a coffee shop and he meets another person who just finished the screenwriting class and gave it all up, and decided to go and become a periodontist. Go back to school and become a periodontist. So now, suddenly you have a story about someone who is bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. They're excited. They're going forth, and somebody else who's at the end of their thing, and they have dire consequences for whatever reason. They decided they can't do it anymore, and they're now struggled, and they're choosing a different profession. So now you have two people on polar opposites that brings an automatic conflict, and we then want to go and explore breaking the story. So that's finding what your story is about. However, I have a philosophy on this. And my philosophy, and everybody who knows me, they'll say, oh yeah, this is Todd. My philosophy is that every story, no matter how hard whatever you do, every story is about love. Every single story is about love, no matter what. Finding love, losing love, what are you in love with? the love of a pet, the love of another person, the love of an object, the love of whatever. And we're going to go and work on this a little bit. And I'll basically prove my point, or you could disprove me in any way that you like. So there's a big difference between plot and story. So plot is Kenji and Lori. Plot is Kenji goes to Starbucks. He brought with him money. He orders the Starbucks, and we have to get him to the end, and that's when he ultimately gets Lori's phone number. So those are all plot points. So we have the beginning plot point, there's a middle plot point, the end plot point is Kenji gets Lori's number and maybe skips on the way home. Great. But that's not the story, because the story is what happens in between. The story is what happens in the breath. Story is based out of character. And plot, in my brain, plot always follows character, because character is what motivates your plot point. So if you just have, this is the example that I like to give. So Jack and Jill, everybody's familiar with Jack and Jill. All right, so Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Jack fell down, broke his crown, and then he went home and cried to his mother. Did whatever he was supposed to do. That's an action story, right? That's an action. So now we have a nice action story. Jack and Jill there, because we have a verb. They went up the hill. Jack and Jill went up the hill. There's action. They get to the top of the hill and he gets some water. Great. There's more action. Then he slips and he falls down. More action. And he rolls down the hill and he has a broken heart. And that's all action. We see that story a number of times, and sooner or later we're going to get really bored because we don't care about the characters. We could care less about the characters. So how do we care about the characters? Well, Jack and Jill go up the hill, but Jack and Jill are holding hands as they go up the hill. So what does that say immediately? Jack and Jill have a relationship. So they like each other. As opposed to Jack is pulling Jill up the hill, which means maybe he's a kidnapper, or maybe something else is going on, or maybe there's something at the top of the hill that Jill doesn't like. But if Jack and Jill have a relationship, so suddenly we are exploring their character and they have a relationship. So they're going up the hill together. And when they get to the top of the hill, why is he fetching a pail of water? Well, he wants to take care of his girlfriend. So they're going up the hill. Maybe Jill has a basket. Jack is taking her up to the top of the hill. They now unfold this beautiful picnic. He decides that he wants to go and give her something out of the well. He goes down to the well. So you see what we're building. We're building character. So the plot now is going to follow the character. And the greatest stories that you'll find, discover, read, watch, whatever, go to the theater, is where every time you watch the story, you learn a little bit more about the character. And that's really what you want to do. You really want to build into character. Me personally, when I work as a director, I have a wonderful relationship with actors. So my relationship is really strong. The more I can work with actors, the better. And I'm heavily character. I'm really all about character. Chase scenes are all wonderful, but I want character. So that's really what we explore. So by the time I'm on stage, or I'm on wherever I am, working with actors, I've already broken down my characters. I already understand my characters to a certain degree, and then I can go and talk character with my actors so we can figure out what's next. So with that said, you have a certain responsibility. The director responsibility is your overall production. It's your overall show. So be it what's on stage, be it on film, that is your responsibility as the director. Your actor responsibility is when they take the script, they break it down, and they start to do a breakdown of their characters and really understand their characters and find out what that relationship is to all of the characters. All right, does that make sense to you guys so far? All right, so, and this is really where I work. So your writers, when they go into the room, or they're even working at home, just like everybody else, they are just writing and writing and writing and writing until they find out what the story is really about. So Leah mentioned that I just wrote a feature. So during the pandemic, not that it's over, I don't really know what's going on. So, but last year, so last year there were a couple things that went on. One was that I'm a directing member of the Actors Studio. Some of you guys may have heard of that. So 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 Leah mentioned smartphone theater. So smartphone theater is, and I'm not pitching smartphone theater, but there, when the pandemic struck, and as someone who was going to workshops, like 2 or 3, it's like going to the gym. I don't know what you would call it. That's the it's just something that we would do. Everything closed down. We closed down our theater, and I'm like, what's up? What are we going to do? So I created this theater platform, which a lot of people have seen in various incarnations now, except we do it really well now. And we wound up doing 50 plays, about 50 plays last year, and all originals. And so why do I bring that up? Because I was reading plays all of the time. It never stopped. And that's what I wanted to do. So people are sending me plays and sending me plays and sending me plays. And there's a couple things you have to watch out for as a writer, is that, as you were talking about with breaking the story as a writer, some people get a germ of an idea and they think that's it. So they write around that germ of an idea, but that idea is not strong enough to hold a play or to hold a story. So what they'll do is they'll say, "Oh, I've got a great story about, whatever, a guy who finds a pen." Okay, and they go and they build a story about this wonderful pen, and there just isn't really enough conflict. There is enough story there to build it. And believe me, there's so many wonderful writers out there that who I've read, but whatever, their through line just doesn't get strong enough. As a storyteller, especially as a screenwriter, and playwright is a little bit more so, but you don't necessarily have to be a wordsmith. Plays tend to be a little bit more literary than screenwriters, because screenwriting is much more of a visual medium than theater. Theater tends to be, obviously theater is all about the playwright and the actor. Television is about, the writers have become much more dominant now than they have been in the past, but it's very much about the director. The point I'm trying to make is that you don't necessarily have to be a wordsmith in order to tell your story. You want to be able to tell your story, get to it. Don't make it so flowery. There are a lot of writers out there that really, really love the English language, and they will make their stories, they make the prose so flowery that we never get to the point. We never figure out what the story is. And I've read so many stories where they are just beautifully crafted, or they're beautifully said in the English language, but I couldn't tell you what they are about. There's a writer that I work with back in New York who's highly successful, but he sends me pieces that I can't even tell you what they're about, because they're so flowery, and you really want to get to the point. You absolutely want to get to the point. All right. So as a director, I break the story down too. So you have a writer, the writers will go and they'll break the story, and they're like, "Oh, finally, this is a great story. Oh, the story I was telling you." So I was writing a feature. I just wrote a feature, and I wrote it during the pandemic. I have a manager. I sent it off to my manager. The manager said, "Oh, I wrote it in a very specific way. The pandemic offered restrictions, obviously. So I wrote it as an ensemble piece, lots of actors in the situation that was going on. Obviously, time doesn't stand still. Pandemic stories are really hard to sell right now. So I went and I did a rewrite. Everybody rewrites constantly. So nobody does a first draft and says we're ready to go. So I went into a rewrite and I changed it, and changed a lot. As I was changing it, I'm like, what is my story? Because it didn't exist, because the first time just didn't hold true anymore. So what is the story? What is the story? What is the story? Then finally I broke the story as the writer. And I figured out because it was no longer an ensemble film, I had to find that one character. So I found it. I found my main character. I found, Leah, is that you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just want to take a moment just to like as in the creation process, because I remember talking to you about this,
Mhm.
and the humbleness. I'm just so struck by your humbleness to have been so committed to something, to be writing it, and to be in that place of where, it's like I think when I'm writing something, oftentimes I'm like, oh, I know what this is about. Like I'm writing it, I know it, I got it, and then it's so easy to get attached to what you think it's about, and then to be able to take that step back and be so humble as to be like, well, wait a second, do I actually know? And
Right.
is there something like, did I do my job of creating the framework, and then now to actually stand back and look at what wants to live truly inside that home that you created. It's such a, I feel like it's, I just want to pinpoint it as, to me, this is the sign of mastery, when you can not be so attached to thinking that you know what it is, and to let the life of it emerge and reveal itself to you, and then be like, okay, all that work that I did,
That's it.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna just put it aside and now follow like where the best life can live. I don't know if that's the right word, but yeah.
That's it. You're right, Leah. It's heartbreaking when you work months and months and months on a storyline and dialogue that you think is so snappy and so it's just everything is working, and then you read it and you go, I have no idea what this is. It's not working. It's not working for me. And all of a sudden, I mean, what the beautiful thing about today is you just copy it and you put that aside and then you start editing the copied version instead of just hitting that delete button. I used to hit the delete button. Now I just copy and put it out. I mean, sometimes I'm just, but now I just copy, and I'm actually writing. I just started. I've got a couple things going on, but I just started writing a piece that I wrote 8 years ago, and I think now is the time. I wrote a short 8 years ago that I loved. That it was really great to make it a short. And now, in the way the world's working, I think it would be a great limited series. So I pitched it the other day, and people said yes. And now I'm doing a rewrite on it to see if I could actually, make it happen. And that's it. I mean, it's
I
you
think
know,
that's incredible. I just heard a God, I wish I could remember the name of the book for you guys, because the book was so incredible. It's one of my favorite books.
mm,
And I was, when you get obsessed with something and you're like, wow, how did they do that? And this guy, it was almost done, right? And he decided to do his last rewrite. He hand wrote, he started from the beginning. He literally rewrote the entire book for the final edit. And it
oh
was
my
literally
God,
in rewriting everything that he discovered this omniscient character that turned out to be what made the book magic.
there you
Like it
go.
was the part that I love more than anything. And I was like, again, that like, wow, you just were able to do that. Um,
It's it's a thing. I mean, I mentioned to Leah, some of you guys may know the book Way of the Peaceful Warrior. It's been around for a while, and so I own the rights to that book. I own the There's one other thing along the lines of the why is reveal your own personal, find your own person,
I just
your
put
own
them in the chat box.
curiosity as a writer. So when you sit down, make sure that you yourself are curious about the subject matter that you're diving into, as opposed to, this would really be cool. I want to write a story about this. So make sure that you're curious, because if you're curious, then your audience will be curious, because we'll feel that curiosity. And that curiosity is going to go into all of your characters. We'll find that. So you're telling in this workshop, are you telling your personal stories? Are these I stories, or are these stories? These are all I stories. Okay. So in your I story, find, what is it that is propelling your I story? What is the curiosity about yourself that is propelling that story? And then, of course, in what we're discussing, what is the love in that story?
At this point, students went into breakout groups and read the first scene of various scripts. The first group to present afterwards discussed the film Joker. To follow along with the discussion, you can do a search for Joker script, read the first scene, think about it, then keep watching this video.
Let's jump into our Joker group. Who is our Joker group? Okay, so you guys, why don't you guys unmute yourselves? And I am going to ask you a series of questions. All right. First off, what is it about? What did you gather? Doesn't matter if you've seen the film or not. If you start talking about the third act, let's not talk about the third act. So we're only talking about the first act. So what did you just read? What is Joker about?
It's about a man who's suffering in terms of love. It's about a man who's suffering
Just
for
what's it?
lack of love. I think it's a striking way to look at things about love. I
Right.
like that framework or that view. So yeah, it's a man who's really lacking love. His mother's committed into a mental asylum. He's gotten out. He's with a social worker in the first scene, and the social worker, there's a certain care coming from the social worker, but that's the man's job.
Mm-hmm.
So you get the sense that there's maybe he doesn't have anybody in his life who really loves him. And then we went on a little bit, and he gets bullied by a group of kids. I mean, he's a grown man, he's dressed as a clown, which is, to bring joy and love and happiness. But it's like such a hard city that he lives in.
Sure.
There's such a deficit of it, but you know that he wants that.
So there's a huge element of loneliness that's involved. Okay. So, and who hasn't felt lonely in their life? Everybody has felt lonely at one time or another. So this is one thing that audiences are going to identify with. Doesn't mean if you're reading it or if you're seeing it, doesn't make a difference. So one is loneliness. So this is a story about loneliness. Now, who hasn't been bullied? Everybody's been bullied. So there's a story about an underdog. So remember we spoke about underdogs. So this character is an underdog. He's a guy who is lacking just across the board. We get this in the first 5 pages. You just mentioned that he gets bullied by kids. So what's worse than to be an adult and be bullied by kids as he's dressed up as a clown? So where he just keeps on going darker and darker and more down the rabbit hole. Is there a line that you read that can define his character? Who is he and what does he want? Is there anything that stuck out to you? I believe, another one of Todd's beliefs, I believe that there are hidden lines. There's at least one throughout every story that basically defines what everything is about. And the writer doesn't put them there deliberately. They just happen to fall in there. Sometimes you'll find them in the beginning, sometimes they're in the middle, sometimes they're at the end. And I almost always find them. And I'll say, I love this line. To me, this one line is what the story is all about. So there is a line in the first 5 pages of Joker, to me, that defines what the story is about. Did you pick it up?
The one that catches my eye is the one where Arthur says, "I just don't want to feel so bad anymore."
Exactly. Exactly. That's what I wrote down as well. To me, I believe that script, thank you for picking that up. To me, that Joker is all about that one line. I just don't want to feel bad anymore. And he spends the rest of this feature film trying not to feel bad. It's a guy who's dealing with mental illness, and this mental illness is making him feel bad. And whatever the cause of that mental illness is, that's certainly Act Two will explore that. Act Two, in the beginning we say, here is the problem. Here's what your main character wants. So every story, what does your character want? Why can't they get it? What does your character want? Why can't they get it? That's it. I want my tea. Why can't I get it? And then Act Two is the journey of getting my tea, and I'm going to have a lot of new revelations and new trials and new failures and new all sorts of things on why can't I have my tea. It's that simple. What does the character want? Is the beginning of your story. Why can't they have it? Is your Act Two. Act Three is the resolution. Did they get their tea? They didn't get their tea. If they didn't get it, why not? And did they got something else instead? If they didn't get it, it's a European film and everybody dies. If they did get it, then it's an American film and everybody's happy. And that very basic. It's a very 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 basic story structure. Is what do you want? Why can't you get it? And the journey of Act Two of how they're going to build up their strength in order to get what they want. And at the end, he says, page 4, Arthur says, I just don't want to feel bad anymore. Puts it out there. I just don't want to feel bad anymore. It's great. All right. Maybe it's because we also learned that he has, Arthur, the Joker, has very low self-esteem throughout this. He's being beaten up by his therapist. He's being beaten up by kids. He's playing a clown. He's spinning a thing. He doesn't really look at himself highly whatsoever. So maybe part of the story is I just don't want to feel bad anymore. Is I want to love myself. So what is another way of saying this? I want to love myself. I don't want to feel bad anymore. I want to learn how to love myself. It's another way to phrase that. So there you go. That proves my theory a little bit in the Joker. Okay. Any other revelations in these first 5 pages? Kenji, what did you discover? Anything else that jumped out?
It was really that one line. It's just like his recognition that it's getting crazy out there.
Mm-hmm.
But then also contrasted that with his dancing and like really getting into the song. There's like a hurt or a loneliness, and yet there's also this I don't know, just like celebratory aspect of him when he's dancing to the ragtime song and flailing around his sign.
Right, and that may almost be like his own kind of therapy. So it's what he's doing so he doesn't feel bad. How am I going to make myself feel better? I'm going to laugh. I'm going to dance. I'm going to move. I'm going to do all these things in order to make myself feel better. So whatever it takes, he's trying things.
It seems like with this, there's a real contrast. The first scene and the second scene. The first scene, he's there with the therapist or with social worker. And the idea, I think, often with psychology and therapy is that, okay, this individual has a mental health problem, and we're going to try to help them overcome it so that they can be normal in society. But then you're seeing that society is his main problem, not really himself. Like he has some problems, but there's, it's pretty hard to be mentally healthy in a tremendously unhealthy world. Like it's hard to be physically healthy if you're in the middle of a really polluted place. It's like it's not just about your own health, right?
Sure.
So it seems like that's a lot of the film is that his mental health and his, descent isn't just his own doing. It's a collective sin, if
Great.
you will.
What a great subplot. So you have a subplot where somebody is trying to fit into a society, but society is already so sick. Society is already so dysfunctional. So we don't know who's the most dysfunctional, and why does he want to go and play in the sandbox anyway? Because that's what's socially acceptable at this point.
Mhm.
So there's a story in Peaceful Warrior. So a little aside, since you brought this up, there's a story, and the story goes something like there's a king, and he lives on top of a hill, and he has all of his community that he reigns over at the bottom of the hill. And one day the well goes bad, so all the water it becomes poisonous, and his whole community drinks from the well, and they all go crazy. And from that point on, all this community looks up the king, and then they all think that the king is nuts. They think he's absolutely nuts, and the king loses control over his community. So the king comes down from the hill, and he drinks from the well, and then the king goes crazy, and finally the king has become sane again. So it's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's it.
Exactly
Yeah.
what you're talking about. Yes, yeah, that's great. And it's the frog in the hot water. It's at what point do we realize that we're all just dysfunctional, and then you have someone who's outside outside of what we're calling normal. Normal is such a horrible word. So yeah, in society. So great. Yeah, thank you for that. It's rich. It's a dark story, and it's heavy. This particular incarnation of the whole DC Comics, it's a very heavy character, and which is great. Which is really, I worked on Spider-Man for a little while, the TV series Spider-Man, and the cool thing about writing Spider-Man is that he's just a kid. So when you write Spider-Man, what you're doing is you're writing a story about a high school kid who's going through high school problems. That's it. It's that easy. And there's no superpowers. There's no nothing. It's a kid. That one line with what is it? With great power comes great responsibility. So it's basically it's a person going through high school drama, and then all of a sudden they recognize that they've got this special something going on. So now you throw that on top of high school drama, but that's all it is, and that's where I had so much fun, because you're watching a high schooler learn that, and this is when you learn your talents. So you're watching a teenager basically learn their talents, and have all done that. When you're a teenager, it's like, oh wow, I can run fast, or it could be physical, it could be mental. I could play an instrument. I'm a good writer. I'm creative. I have a good eye. This is when you're discovering yourself, as in your teenage years, and that's really what makes it so interesting.
Can I comment, Todd? Just
Sure.
having also seen the movie and really enjoyed it, and got to see some meta layers within it. The last time I watched it was almost watching it in comparison to the Batman story. As if like watching Joker in a mirror relation to Batman, and also how that gets twisted as a shadow,
Right.
as like the vigilante that is fighting against the oppressive forces of the city, but then how that can be twisted into a villainous kind of subplot.
Right.
So it's pretty fascinating to kind of also like see all those different lenses into
You're right.
how they put it together.
Yeah, Joker and Batman were always paired side by side as if they were the same kind of person, and because they've both become these vigilantes, except one is killing the good guy and the other one's killing the bad guy. But
good guy, bad guy depends on who's saying it. Right?
that's what I was going to say. That's exactly what I was going to say. It all depends on your perception on who's the good guy and who's the bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, yeah, fascinating. All right, thanks.
Next up is a discussion about the pilot episode of Mrs. Maisel. If you'd like to follow along, you can find the script online and read the first few pages.
All right, Mrs. Maisel. Where's our Mrs. Maisel team? All right, so Mrs. Maisel is, so now we're jumping into a television show. You're reading the pilot. So the pilot has to establish things right away because obviously it wants you to come back for episode 2 and for the next 2 seasons. So let's talk about Mrs. Maisel. Go for it.
Quickly, Carmi, I don't know if Carmi's familiar with it. I picked it because it was the only one that I was familiar with. It was a great question. We had a lot of technical difficulties, so we got through 5 written pages of the script, which wasn't very far. It took us to where she was just we're about to see her husband for the first time, her future husband. It was a very interesting question to me because I am somewhat familiar with the show, and I never really thought about your question. Where did the love come in? What did she? I mean, I've watched like maybe 10 episodes of it,
Sure.
and I never thought about where is the love in that story. And so, Carmi, do you want to jump in on? Well, I don't know if we're going with your question right now. Where did the love come in, Todd? What her love might have been? Was that?
You could pick it up anywhere you like. It's up to you.
I thought that the biggest love she hoped for was from the audience, and the way they sliced it with some actual voices of her father, and we got, or I read ahead maybe, but we got to where Joel showed up and there were these other, her college roommate and these other little voices. So you got different glimpses of time, and what she wanted and what she loved and how she got love was different in the different times. So that was interesting all by itself.
Mm-hmm.
And then that we got introduced to so much of background and kind of establishing what her father sounds like, what her mother sounds like.
Sure.
And funny.
It's funny.
Yeah.
So we're learning about characters. We're certainly learning about characters. So here's my question to you two. How many have you guys all seen Maisel? Have anybody not seen Maisel?
Have you seen Maisel, Carmi?
Yeah, not
Okay.
But I have seen. Yeah.
All right. So the story opens up where?
It opens up in a ballroom.
What's happening in the ballroom?
It's her wedding.
What's a wedding about?
Yeah.
What's a wedding about?
And well, she's actually then in a comedy.
Say it out loud. What's a wedding about?
Love.
Love. Two people who love each other.
I guess it
automatically
right away.
They throw it at you right away. What's the story about? The story is about, it's a love story. Okay? Right from the beginning. So it's a love story. This woman met this man. That's season 1, by the way. Season 1, it's all about this beautiful love story that goes dysfunctional. All right? Do you guys see that? And they throw it at you. It's a wedding love story. Now, we established the love story between the two of them. What's the other thing that we establish? And this is a little bit more subtle. What's the other thing that we establish? And this is about her character. And this is what drives the show.
Well,
so,
what we were talking about whether she loves herself, and just very briefly. And I think Carmi and I were sort of, she loves her audience. She loves making her audience laugh.
So why? Why does she love making her audience laugh?
Well, she's self-deprecating.
So why?
In a way.
So so I'm saying why, but you could also use the word so what. And this is so you could always ask yourself why, and you could always say so what. So if I want to be a little bit of a hard ass, Ray, right now you would say well, she loves her audience, and I would say so what, and then you would say
she needs her audience to love her back, I guess.
So what?
I don't know, she's so freaking funny.
Mhm.
I I know this show a little bit, and so I know for me the story isn't really about that man that she marries. It's
Okay.
it's about herself. So um and more so about her family, which can I tell you what line really jumped out at me?
Sure, please.
So the line that jumps out at me is, "This day is perfect. It's like a dream. Or is it a nightmare if you're my father?" And it seems like that's like a big theme here is what is other people's dream is her nightmare,
Right.
and it like goes back and forth. And
I want you to dissect that line. I love that line. I want you to dissect that line a little bit more. She says, "This day is what?
perfect.
What does perfection mean to her?"
The wedding was everything she wanted it to be. It was what she had been, as you go further, it's what she had been striving forward from day one.
Okay, so keep that in mind. Don't forget it. And the first couple, I think it's in the first page, or it's at least in the first couple of pages. What do we learn about her character? What kind of person is she?
Um,
Let me see here. First, let's see. Marvelous Miss Maisel. Let me see here.
she's very outgoing and funny. I mean, it's just
Mhm.
it's
That's a
there.
result, by the way. That's a result. Outgoing and funny is a result. So, what makes her outgoing and funny?
Her vision, how she can pinpoint with just
Well,
a few words
you're getting
what's
there.
going on.
Okay, so in the first paragraph, I'm on page one. We come up in a ballroom, blah 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 blah. It says framed by. Um, she is happy. Her face is full of perk, spunk, and complete ignorance that bad things today could ever happen because today she has triumphed. Today, forget today is her wedding day. Today she has triumphed. And then her line is, I mean, who does that? Who stands in the middle of a ballroom after drinking, blah, blah, blah. Um, who does that? I do. Let's just, and so instead of me just
Well, it's
mining this, let's just concentrate on triumph. So we have the word perfection and we have the word triumph. All right. What do we know about her?
she works really hard for something, and then
What is
she
she
gets,
working for?
well, in this case, she's working for a wedding
Oh, what is she working for? What is she working towards?
Making
well,
everything all right.
Okay, so build on that. What does that mean?
that it's supposed to turn out the way she dreams it's going to turn out.
Okay, and what's another way of saying that? What are her dreams?
I
Um,
think it's, go ahead, Carmi.
Well, they're classic. They're, have a husband, have a whatever.
Okay. Everybody's dancing around this, and you guys are all so close. So this is what it means to me: perfection. She's a perfectionist. We have established Midge as a perfectionist,
Oh,
Okay.
and
sure.
above and beyond a perfectionist, we have established Midge as a control freak. And above and beyond the fact that she's a control freak is that, and this is what the story is: the marvelous Mrs. Maisel. This is what the story is about. To me, the story is about a perfectionist slash control freak who is doing everything that she's supposed to. This is what the first 5 pages says. It says, "Here I am. I'm this character," and she talks about her college life. She talks about her childhood, her college. She's doing everything what she's supposed to, but she has a voice that tells her that she needs more. So this show is about the package. She gets married. She finds the guy of her dreams. She says somewhere in these first 5 pages that she is going to have the house and the kid and the whole thing. And then what happens is she realizes that's not who she is, and she becomes a stand-up comic. A
Mm.
stand-up comic is the antithesis to everything that she has been groomed for. So the story is about someone who is breaking the mold. Even though she was groomed to be a part of this mold, it's all about how she breaks the mold and how she deals with her society, her family, and her friends, and how she survives so she can go and live her best self, because she doesn't feel that this is her best self. And that's what happens in these first 5 pages. The first 5 pages says that I have a beautiful wedding and a beautiful dress, and I went to college, and she says, I'm a planner. Remember in this, she says, I'm a planner. So she has planned out her life. Plan, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to do. Then what happens? She becomes an entertainer, a stand-up comic, to where it's not up to her anymore, it's up to her audience. She's putting the power out to the rest of the world.
Oh.
There's no, you can't say, I'm going to become a comic and stand in that line and then tomorrow you're a comic. You have to work at it for 10 years and hone your craft. And to make it even better, the writer says, okay, the guy she just married, and this is not in the first 5 pages, but what the writer does is says, the guy she just married is funny, or at least he thinks he's funny.
Mm-hmm.
So now you have someone who's naturally funny versus someone who wants to be funny. And we recognize the guy who wants to be funny falls on his face. And the one who is funny rises. And you can't, that's called talent. You can't plot that out. You can't plan that. I plan to be a funny person. I will never be a stand-up comic. That just is not in my DNA. Impossible. I'm telling you right now, it's impossible. There's in all of my hyphens, that is not one, and it never will be one. And I'm cool with that. I'm totally fine with that. Here, this is talent, and talent you can't plot, you can't plan. It just happens. You can answer. You can certainly answer your call of, am I going to listen to my talent? I mean, everybody has that voice. Everybody has a voice that's telling him, what am I going to do with my life? Do you want to respond to that voice? Do you want to answer to that voice? Some people do, some people don't. It's a very scary thing to do. Very, very scary thing to do, because you are letting go of this reality that the world has set out for you. Your parents, who love you very much and who basically want to protect you, say to you, I'm putting you in a box because this box is really safe. And you're going to go forth and you're going to conquer and you're going to have a family and you do whatever, but you're going to stay in this box because I don't want to see you get hurt. Traditionally, they don't do that to harm you. They do it to protect you. Traditionally, here's someone who has a loving family, and her father is not negative because he's negative. He's negative because he wants to protect his family. He looks at the world and says, she goes and looks at things and says, boy, isn't that shiny and pretty? He looks at the world and says, boy, that's sharp. That's sharp and dangerous. So I'm going to keep you away from that. And that's what it is. So your story, that is your story. Your story is about a woman who's finding her own wings, and it's really safe and it's really dangerous. And there is no safety net, and her family doesn't approve whatsoever. That's what makes it so exciting. Yes.
Can I just add that they also get stuck with her kids?
Yes, absolutely.
There's
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, look at that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And I had a very quick aside question. This is just really a personal question, but it said in the directions something about Joel being Jewishly handsome. And I thought, really? Did they write like that? I mean, that's really offensive, actually. And I'm just curious, what the heck?
That's part of the script. That's how it was
I mean,
written.
she's not Jewish.
No, but her character is.
Yeah, of course. So why couldn't somebody just be handsome? I mean, what does it even mean? What do we even see?
It's like he's not blonde. He's not actually what the dream is, and the names she gave were not Jewish names.
Right.
So he's more like, I mean, I see him as more a Jewishly handsome man is not handsome, handsome. He's more of a nebbish, you know.
But that's my point. It leads to stereotypes out the kazoo. I mean, my family's blonde and Jewish. So please,
It's
I
part
really,
of the story.
pardon?
We're living in a very sensitive time. It's a really interesting time because
Well, this was,
everybody's height, everything is sensitive. And it's you have to be, I hear you, and I totally hear you, and I totally respect what you're saying, Carmi. And I'm not saying that that's right or wrong. I'm saying that we're living in a very sensitive time now. And you know I came up in a time when you would throw everything out there. It was
yeah,
and I don't disagree with throwing everything out there. I agree with throwing everything out there. I think the pendulum has really gone off to one side, and it has to come back to the middle. So look, I'm a
right.
Felderstein.
Okay.
So I know know a lot of traditionally Jewish handsome people and traditionally beautiful Jewish women as well. Look, I'm looking for a guy, and it sounds like she really wants to rock the boat, and she really
Yeah.
wants to find some, very beautiful Nordic or
Yeah.
whatever, very beautiful non-Jewish guy that she's going to run away with. And then she says, I found a very Jewishy looking handsome man. So she's establishing, and then she goes, and
No,
she's
but
doing a review.
she doesn't say it. It's in the script
Yeah,
directions.
yeah, yeah.
It's not
No, I
out
get it.
loud.
But it's
Yeah,
all part of the same thing. It
I
is
see.
very much part
That's,
of
thank you. That's what I was
Yes,
looking for.
sure, sure.
I got it. Thank you.
Okay. Of course, of course. All right. If you guys don't have any more, I want to just respond. So Kenji, you sent me a couple text messages, and it's dealing with racism. There's an expression called, he's referring to Get Out, and that on how they deal with the fact of racism and trauma and so forth. There's something called on the nose dialogue and on the nose storytelling. And on the nose basically means you hit it right where it's supposed to be, or you can go and sort of beat around the bush and then everything surfaces. And on the nose storytelling is usually avoided. It's just you want to make discovery instead of being told. So if you're going through a run through and you're working with a writer, a very common comment would be, that dialogue is a little bit too on the nose. So don't tell me what it's about. Tell me about something else. I'd rather hear about subtext than hear about, what it actually is. So if I were drinking the tea, I could say, oh my God, this is really hot. Or I could say, I just burned my tongue. Or, I mean, this is very subtle, but I'm not telling you what happened. I'm not saying it's hot. I'm saying I could be really wimpy and just say, oh my God, I just burned the back of my throat. My esophagus is melting into my stomach. And that's a much more interesting dialogue than just by saying, boy, this is really hot. And that's what we're talking about. You don't have to nail the dialogue. You don't have to be on the nose. Go describe it. Get into subtext. There's a lot. It's much richer storytelling. Okay. All right, Leah, I think it's all you now.
Todd, thank you so much. What a rich, rich conversation, and thank
My
you for also
pleasure.
bringing us
Thanks for
such
having me.
provocative scripts. And one of the things that I just want to mention before we go, because we are living in such sensitive times, and we're living in times when now for the first time, it's commonplace for our audience to be able to say, I don't want to hear that. And I want to just create this space where, as artists, it's not our job to please people. It's our job to speak to the truth of what we see and to create a space for the revelation and for a greater, deeper conversation to happen. And we've gotten into this weird relationship with consumption and entertainment and story where I mean, I'm opening a can of worms, but I just want to remind you to be brave with your storytelling, to speak what you see and to be true to the story and not think about what people are going to be saying on the other side. when you're in the process of creating. There's going to be a time when you're going to have to tend to all that. But if you don't get to have one space where you get to be completely, fully in the truth of what you see, then we're living in a starved and malnourished society, because storytellers, it's what we do. We get to put the light on all of it. So, okay. Sorry, I had to put that little piece in, since it was,
Oh,
we don't get to speak about these things very often in these parts of the classes, but it came up such a big way from what you brought to us, Todd. And thank you for your generosity, and just like in depth. This is the kind of script analysis that we don't do in most of the classes. And so what I wanted to give us an opportunity to do in these last few moments is for everyone to just to take a moment, take a deep breath, come back and see if you can't do some little weaving in terms of what are you taking away from this class? What are you integrating from this class into your own storytelling? If there's anything that you want to just anchor in and make sure that you work into your practice as you're creating. Todd, thank you for your generosity, for bringing us so much in-depth consideration for the psychology of storytelling and just the humanity in storytelling. I feel like you just brought so much depth and perspective for how to meet a story and how to respect a story and how to break a story.
such a
And
pleasure.
really appreciate this. And there's ways that you can stay in connection with Todd. I put a link, and we'll put it in afterwards too, in terms of the story. I'm going to put it at the end too, just so you guys can catch it. But the Smartphone Theater um, Company, this is just kind of an amazing offering. And we'll put more links so you can follow Todd's work and his creations and his new feature piece and all the things.